Welcome to the Survival Guide for Orthodontists, the podcast that makes you the authority in orthodontics in your community. Get ready for insights on how to compete on expertise and trust against mail order and retail orthodontics. It's not always about the lowest fees. And now, from the People in Practice team, your hosts, Dr. Leon Klempner and Amy Epstein.
Welcome to the Survival Guide for Orthodontists. I'm Amy Epstein, and I have an MBA in marketing and 20 years of marketing communications experience. I co-founded People in Practice with my dad just about 10 years ago.
And I am Leon Klempner, Amy's dad, a retired, proud, board-certified orthodontist and co-founder of People in Practice, and currently teaching at Harvard part-time.
Today, we're excited to have Dr. Chris Riolo join us on the Survival Guide for Orthodontists. Dr. Riolo earned his DDS from the University of Michigan and his specialty certificate and MS in orthodontics at the University of Detroit Mercy. He then returned to the University of Michigan, where he completed a PhD in epidemiology from the School of Public Health. Dr. Riolo currently has academic appointments at the University of Detroit Mercy and the University of Washington Dental Schools. He maintains a completely digital private practice consisting almost entirely of adult patients, emphasizing the use of lingual appliances and in-house clear aligners. Dr. Riolo publishes and lectures on topics related to lingual orthodontics, 3D printing, and orthodontic digital workflow, which makes him an excellent guest for our podcast. So, Dr. Riolo, we're very grateful for your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, specifically, we'd like to learn more about your journey toward going to a completely digital practice. We know you have a super successful practice in the Seattle area, and how you got to the point you're at now, I think would be of real interest to a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. I practiced for 15 years in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there I had just sort of experimented with lingual orthodontics. It was maybe 4 or 5% of my practice. I did enjoy it, but I had a typical orthodontic practice, which was 80% kids and 20% adults. And, they weren't really adults by my standards currently. They were young moms of many of my patients. So they were late 20s, early 30s. And then I moved to Seattle for a whole bunch of reasons. My wife and I decided to pick up, and we sold the practice. She quit her faculty position, and we moved to Seattle, and I decided to open up downtown. I figured I'd see more adult patients, and that's what I wanted, more adult patients. I didn't realize that I would get like 98% of my patients would be adults. And so things changed rapidly. At the my use of lingual appliances grew to about 40% of the practice. And after the integration of in-house aligners, it grew to over 75% of my practice.
So let's talk about, just for a second, the shift toward adult patients. So you had, people like me, a little younger than me, let's be honest, coming to your practice, parents, mothers of young children. And so talk to me about, from that point, what you identified as them making good patients for your practice into having almost a completely adult practice, because that's a big shift.
Well, I don't think I knew what I was getting into. I didn't realize how hard it would be to make a living treating adults, real adults, older adults, with highly worn, highly restored dentitions that require interdisciplinary care, require a lot of time. You put a lot of time in up front with the consultations, with the planning with other professionals, the prosthodontist, the periodontist, the GP, and it's hard to, at first it's hard to work that into your treatment fee. And they're very interested in minimizing the exposure to buccal appliances. They're interested in aligners, or they're interested in, a fixed appliance system that would be placed in the lingual, because they don't want their braces to show. It's natural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Chris, if I could jump in. So I know you're in a fairly competitive area in Seattle. There's no shortage of orthodontists in your area. So
Yeah,
it sounds like you've developed a niche. We're marketers. So when I hear you
exactly.
speak, it sounds like you've kind of targeted in on a group that would most benefit from a cosmetic approach to getting their teeth straight. And we have a lot of our clients that have seen that opportunity of growth in the adult population, as well as the move towards a more digital workflow. So I'm particularly interested in how you incorporate in-house aligners in your practice. Do you have your own, obviously you have your own printer, but is it one printer, multiple printers?
Yeah.
How much did it cost? Just tell me if you're doing
Well,
all of them in-house, some of them. Just give us a little background.
yeah. Well, so first, a little bit of background. My practice is right on the edge of the Amazon campus, and Amazon has attracted other tech companies. So we got Facebook, we got Google, we got various tech companies, and Amazon down here. So it's a little bit more diverse, but it's all adults. Frequently, they have a lot of dental need when they come to see me. They don't have a dentist. I make more referrals to dentists, it seems, than I get in. And these tech workers, they tend to stay for a couple of years and move on. So I'm kind of an extreme example, but it is a niche. Uh, uh, Lingual orthodontics is a niche, for sure, and there's a high demand for it in an urban area. So it's not something that can be, this learning curve is steep, and so I think it's a fairly secure niche as the marketplace is changing a lot lately. In terms of incorporating in-house aligners, well, the reason I went from 40% lingual to 75% lingual was the ability to do cost-effective hybrid treatment. So I'll give you one example. If you're doing lingual orthodontics, lower anterior crowding is very inefficient with lingual fixed appliances. Inner bracket distance is a problem. You don't have access to the lingual surfaces of the teeth. There are some mechanical issues. So what you can do, especially in an extraction case, is you can align the teeth, initially align the teeth and use the extraction space, close that up with clear aligners, right? And get access to the lingual surfaces of the teeth. And then you transition to your lingual fixed, because you aren't going to be able to finish the case in terms of angulation changes and incisal gingival movements with your clear aligners. There's some limitations there, but they're great at, resolving crowding. And so all of a sudden, these cases that I was, hesitant to do, or I would put buccal in the lower and lingual in the upper, all of a sudden became very doable with lingual appliances, and my practice exploded. And I have, to answer your question about printers, I have 9 3D printers right now, and we use them for different things. Some of the printers we have DLP printers that we use for our in-house aligners. We have some other printers that we're using for creating our indirect trays for bracket placement.
Yeah, so I know a lot of our clients are using aligners oftentimes to get the braces off and finish their cases in a combination style like that. But it sounds like you're starting them off with aligners and then moving towards lingual to finish the case?
Well, not always, but that's one scenario I gave you, right? Those are cases that would have been more difficult to treat if the patient didn't want anything on the outside of their teeth. That would be a case that would tend to go a little longer, because it's hard to level and align those lower anteriors with lingual if you're forced to do that. But now you can keep the treatment time down. You can efficiently level, get access to the lingual surface of the teeth, do the initial alignment, and so you can keep your lingual treatment time the same as your buccal treatment time. It's still an efficient way to do it. Now, the problem in the past has been fees. You're not going to pay, Invisalign $1,800 or $1,500, and then you're going to pay whoever's doing your lingual custom appliance system. You'll have $4,000 or $5,000 in lab fees, right? It's cost prohibitive for most of your patients. But if you bring that workflow in house, now you're controlling the workflow, you're controlling the quality, and you can do it at a reasonable price point, a very reasonable price point. The software I'm using is it used to be Elemetrics, SureSmile. Now it's owned by Dentsply. And the nice thing about that software for me is I use it to do almost all of my linguals done with the SureSmile. But you can coordinate on one software platform. You can coordinate your aligners and your lingual, which is nice.
I wanted to ask about, we talked about the fact that this is a real differentiator for your practice, and that you have a real niche. How do you market that, or how do you attract new patients? How do you differentiate yourself, to non-patients, those that really would benefit from seeing you?
Yeah, I used to work really hard at marketing to try to get kids in my downtown practice. I didn't accept what I was, an adult orthodontist. And so I finally, a few years back, I finally accepted that I'm going to be treating adults down here. If you want to treat kids, I should probably go out to the suburbs and treat kids. But downtown, I'm going to be treating adults. Stop trying to get people to drive their kids downtown. I don't do a lot of marketing, honestly. It markets itself. A lot of my patients are Asian. They're on Asian, there's Asian social networking platforms that I have never heard of, you've never heard of. They're all in Chinese. That's one example. They find me through these social networks. Of course, Amazon, Facebook, Google, they all have internal boards. And so I don't do a lot of direct marketing to these patients. They find me.
So digital word of mouth, essentially.
It is digital word of mouth. And these patients, the patients that want lingual orthodontics, they tend to really seek it out. They do a lot of research. They come in here a lot of times knowing a lot about the different products. Now, there are, that's still a minority of the patients. It's not, maybe it's 20 or 30% of the patients. Most patients come in here and haven't heard of lingual orthodontics. So they come in, they want clear aligners, right? And they're thinking they're going to get clear aligners. And sometimes they do. But you can imagine if you've got a gingival balance problem and you're going to try to level the gingival balance on an interdisciplinary treatment, that's very difficult to do with clear aligners, basically impossible. And so once you explain to them, you got to take some time and explain that you want to use the right tool for the right job. Maybe clear aligners can be part of the solution. But we're going to need some fixed appliances. Then they have the choice between buccal and lingual, and it's very little choice. They always choose the lingual. Yeah, I mean, there are another large percentage of my patients come from retreats, clear aligner retreats. The more clear aligners orthodontists do and general dentists do, the more patients I get, it seems. I have a Candico right across the street. And I'm busier than ever. I'll bet you it's 20% of my patients are clear aligner retreats. They're either people who didn't like wearing the liners, didn't wear them very well. That's not that many. Most of them wear them pretty well. But they're not happy with the results for various reasons. And it's because orthodontists are pressing the envelope of what can be done with clear aligners. It's the only tool in their toolbox. So frequently, they're modifying their treatment objectives and rather than changing the tool, which is, some patients that's going to be fine. Other patients wanted an ideal result.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. There is got to be a balance. And what we found is that both convenience, cost, and aesthetics are what's driving the market right now. And as a result, you need to be able to address these issues with something that is cosmetically appealing to the patients. So I think having lingual and having aligners in your tool chest really gives you all of the marketing tools and all of the clinical tools to get the result that you want to get and still satisfy, the appetite of the patient.
You hit on one point that's really important: convenience. I think there's a perception out there by orthodontists that people go to Candico and Smile Direct Club because of cost. And at least where I live, cost is not the factor. These people have a lot of money, and they go for convenience. Now, there may be places in the country where people are choosing that option for cost, but it's certainly not here. And you have to think about that with your practice, for sure. You have to make your practice accessible to these people, because they want convenience. They want to minimize the appointments. They want hours that are workable. It's a lot better since the shutdown because everybody's working from home. But that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, you hear that out there, listeners, orthos out there? I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, where Amy and we've been talking with our clients about how important it is to provide that. And, there are various tools and technologies to help to achieve those goals. So part of the podcast is an opportunity for a caller to ask a question. So if you don't mind, we have a caller, and we'll ask you a question, and then you could respond directly.
My name is Dr. John Grubb. I'm a retired ABO certified orthodontist, and I live with my wife in San Diego, California. My question is, with the rapidly increasing orthodontic office overhead costs, particularly being paid to large orthodontic suppliers for liner staging and construction, would the AAO consider developing a technology division to create this needed software and other softwares and technologies, charging appropriate fees for use, to assist all active dues-paying AAO members, ADA-approved orthodontic residency programs, and active members of the World Federation of Orthodontists?
Well, it sounds like John Grubb read my editorial, James Vaden and myself, from September 2021, last September, that talked about this issue a little bit. Well, you'll notice in my practice, I'm heavily software dependent. And I think more and more orthodontists are software dependent. And it's not just aligners and lingual. I mean, a lot of these adult patients, they're highly restored dentitions. If I'm going to bond a lingual bracket, how do I bond that to a gold crown? How do I bond that to a porcelain fused to metal crown or amalgam? And the way I do that is I create custom brackets. I print them in chrome cobalt, right? And so we're doing printing not just of resin, we're doing printing of metal, and we're integrating our fixed system with our aligner system in this practice. This is all software dependent. And, my software costs are significant, but I think we all have significant software costs now. I can't imagine a heavy Invisalign practice. I can't imagine what their monthly lab bills to Invisalign, but it's, I'm just got to be $30,000, $40,000 for many of us or more. And so, yeah, I urge people to take a look at that editorial, HAODO, September 2021. It talks about some of the issues I think that we're facing with these corporations, and some of the opportunities we have. I mean, digital orthodontics presents our profession with a huge opportunity. 3D printing and digital design. It used to be you had to have a multi-building facility to produce brackets or custom appliances. I visited 3M's facility for Incognito in Bad Essen, Germany. It's a multi-building facility, 150 employees are producing Incognito, lingual braces. Look at, you can produce, I have produced exactly a fully integrated prescription metal lingual appliance with a concept printer. It's a metal printer. It's 3 feet by 3 feet by about 5 feet. You can put it in your office, right? It's expensive now. It's a $150,000 piece of equipment, but those prices are coming down. And you'll see other companies that are printing brackets, printing ceramic brackets, ceramic infused resin brackets, right? You got Lightforce, you have Braces on Demand. There are a couple companies in Asia now printing brackets. These are all software dependent, right? Some of these companies are printing zero prescription brackets. Some of them are integrating the patient-specific prescription into the brackets. And so this this technology presents us with the ability to control our own workflow instead of being, if you read this editorial, all the different ways we're at the mercy of these companies. Doesn't mean we have to do everything in-house, but we will, if we follow through developing our own software. And that's what's proposed in this editorial, is that I was proposing that an association like the AAO develop staging software for the use of the membership. And more than just the use of the membership, the use of any educationally qualified orthodontist worldwide who's a member of Organized Orthodontics. It would be a game changer. Let's say $100 a month for all the staging you can do. That would change the third world. In a country like Nepal, a fixed appliance treatment is $600, the whole treatment fee for buccal. For Lingual, it might be $900. For clear aligners, it's $2,000. Why? Software cost. And so for $100 a month, if you could, for $100 a month, stage all the aligners you needed, that would be a game changer for most of us. Can you imagine getting rid of your aligner bill? Now, it's a lot of work to stage and print and manufacture your aligners. You don't have to do that work in-house. You would have the option to maybe stage with this software, download the STLs and print at a local lab and manufacture at a local lab. The point is, we'd have control over our workflow.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, and it's a short podcast for sure. But, a couple of things jump out at me. One is, what's the likelihood of the AAA going into a technology business realistically in terms of developing
I think it's a tough sell to them. It's a paradigm shift for them to start thinking about the way they operate. We would have to start thinking of ourselves in the AAO as more of a guild, more of an organization to support our practices and our patients, rather than just running ads and doing some lobbying to politicians. And the advantage, though, of starting out with some aligner staging software is I think it would more than pay for itself very quickly. But it gets the AAO's big toe in the software development business, right? And so once you know how to develop software, then they're positioning themselves to address the needs of the profession into the future. We don't know what those needs are going to be. Maybe they're going to be, fixed appliance design and printing. We don't know. The point is, they will have the ability to develop software. Another huge point is, we are the only ones not collecting our data. Insurance companies are all collecting our data. All these other manufacturing companies are collecting data. Invisalign's collecting data. 3M's collecting data. Everybody's collecting data but us. Right? And data is power. And there's many reasons why that's true. I mean, you just think about when you do a typical adult treatment, you're rarely getting an ideal result. These occlusions are highly worn and highly restored. So and frequently people don't want surgery, so you're treating to some compromise. Well, when you get done, you look at the result and you wonder, do I suck or am I great? You don't know, right? What do you compare it to? But with data, you could actually have a registry of patients. We'd have the knowledge. We'd be able to compare. You'd know if this result is typical. Are you in the 90th percentile of orthodontists or the 10th percentile? And then if you're in the 10th percentile, what were you doing different than the people who are the 90th percentile? Well, it takes data to answer those questions. And on a more population level, we'd find out we'd have real evidence-based care in terms of what works and what doesn't work for our patients. But you got to begin to collect data to do that, right? And this would be a first step. So I don't see the staging software. It's a large benefit, but it isn't the real benefit. The real benefit is having the AAO in the software development business and collecting data, manipulating data, storing data, interacting with us with the data.
Well, that's a whole other discussion, the data aspect of it, because there's no argument there. Data is power, and that's something that we are not collecting. But in the relative short term, most orthodontists are not going to be printing their own brackets generally. They're going to be using Lightforce or some third party. And in terms of aligners, there are if you go with the leading brand, for example, it's prohibitive to treat some of the more limited or easier cases. So it seems like it may not be that expensive really to shop it out. For example, I know with ULab, they don't charge you for the software, and I think it's $2.50 an arch to export an STL file. So you could basically do a 6-month case for around $100 or $120. It's not prohibitively expensive. So, the cost thing, I'm not sure about, but the data thing, that's a significant long-term question, particularly with artificial intelligence. And, we definitely are abdicating that aspect of it.
Yeah, well, you have to think about how fast the profession is changing. If you think about back in 2000 or 2001, 2, and 3, when Invisalign came out, to think about how hard it would have been for an orthodontist to create aligners in-house, right? 3D printers, you had to have, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars for 3D printers. There was no digital technology available to scan your patient. It would have been an unthinkable job to try to plan a comprehensive aligner case in-house. And now it's not a problem. And it's going to be the same way with many of these other appliance systems and technologies we haven't even thought of yet, but they're all going to be software dependent. So my point is, we should be involved and have the ability to create the software as a profession. It's just software, and that will lead us to have the ability to collect data. If you think it's going to be difficult to create staging software, you just look at a few examples. There's a practice out of a new grad out of UCSF, Uniform Aligners. I think they have offices in San Francisco, Seattle, and Chicago. They developed their own staging software. A new grad from UCSF can do it, but the AO cannot. You look at Archform. It was developed in it was Andrew Martz, the son of an orthodontist, developed that in his garage, figuratively. There's a ton of software out there. You don't have to write your own. You could fork existing software. In other words, you buy a copy and develop it independently. You don't have to buy the software from them. They can continue to use their software. You put a new splash page on it. You continue to develop it. They diverge in over time. So there's lots of options to acquire the software.
It's a really interesting thought that you bring up, and I think especially as the AAO looks to reshape itself and continually provide support to its members and stay relevant. I agree that looking into the business of orthodontics and beyond just global advertising would suit it well if it's going to stay relevant.
I mean, that's a huge value, right? You're a member, you get access to staging software.
And there's probably, just on the topic of expanding the AAO's involvement in the business of orthodontics, there's probably more as well that it could do to diversify its offerings to members and make it more attractive.
Yes.
Software being one of them. So it's a good point that you bring up. So listen, this has been a super informative conversation. I think that we have a lot actually more to discuss as it relates to data and the power of data. And we'd love to be able to have you back on to explore some of these topics a little deeper if you'll join us, because we've enjoyed talking to you today. And I think our listeners are learning a lot and certainly have been given a lot to think about.
Yeah. Well, the profession's changing rapidly. I can't, when I graduated in 95, I wouldn't even be able to practice in my practice. I wouldn't have a clue.
And that's an even additional topic to talk about how we circle all of this back into the orthodontic educational system. And I know that my dad's, focused on that too. So So listen, thank you so much for joining us. If our listeners would like to contact you directly, how best to do that?
Well, my email is criolo, CRIOLO @umich.edu. I still have my dental school email, criolo@umich.edu.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Riolo. It's good to talk with you today. We look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot.
You can subscribe or download other podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and now YouTube, where you can see our faces, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate you telling a colleague. For more information about people in practice, you can sign up for our free marketing newsletter on our website at pplpractice.com.
Yep. Thanks for watching and or listening. If you want to contact me directly, my email is leon@pplpractice.com. And most importantly, remember, for forward-thinking orthos, it's never been a better time to be an orthodontist. We are currently in the golden age. Take advantage of it. Until next time, so long.
Thank you for joining us on the Survival Guide for Orthodontists, where we help your practice grow within a massively disrupted industry. Subscribe to this podcast and connect with us on social media. Find us online at thesurvivalguidefororthodontists.com.